James Fox is a highly talented filmmaker who specialises in making documentaries on the UFO phenomenon. I don't think that it's an overestimation to say that he's responsible for creating some of the very best UFO documentaries ever. His most recent two are The Phenomenon and Moment of Contact. Moment of Contact is about the shockingly compelling case of an alleged UFO crash that took place in Varginha, Brazil in 1996. That incident is at the centre of this conversation. Links and timestamps are in the description. Enjoy the episode. So James, to start us off, can you give me a real quick summary of the Varginha case that you based your Moment of Contact documentary on, please, for some of those people that might not be familiar with it?
A lot of people are not familiar with Varginha, and that's one of the Varginha incident. Even UFO researchers like myself, either been reluctant to look into it because it's a rather tall tale. It's commonly referred to as the Roswell of Brazil. The distinct advantages is that this case happened in 1996. So the vast majority of firsthand eyewitnesses are still alive. But in summary, you've got the town of Varginha, Brazil, in the state of Minas Gerais, which is about 5 to 6 hours north of Sao Paulo by car, Brazil. You have, I think the population is somewhere in the realm of 130,000 people in the town of Varginha. You have people claiming, January 20th, 1996, you have people claiming to see a cigar cylinder-shaped metallic object about the size or a little larger than a large school bus in the States. I don't know in England if you get school buses as big as you do in the States, but they're about the size of a small house.
Yeah, like a big minibus.
Yep, and it has a gash. According to the witnesses, it had a gash in the back of it, and it had a white vapor-like smoke coming out, and it made no noise. It had no wings, no visible means of propulsion whatsoever, no tail, no markings on it, and it looked like it was in trouble. And I would say to the witnesses, "What do you mean?" Well, it looked like it was having a hard time keeping afloat. And it had this white vapor coming out. I said, "What white vapor?" They said it wasn't like a blue smoke like you'd expect from a fire. It was a different thing. It was a vapor. And there was a gentleman by the name of Carlos de Souza. He was an ultralight pilot and a professor at a school in Sao Paulo, I think geography and history. And he was on his way at about 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, driving from Sao Paulo to go ultralight flying with a group of friends. And he saw the thing actually hit the ground, and he exited the freeway. He never in 100 million years thought it was an otherworldly device. He thought it was some sort of weird experimental craft. He didn't know. And the last thing on his mind was aliens. He just went up. He figured whoever was on board needed help. So he went up into this place called the Mailini Farm, which is about, 8 or 10 kilometers, somewhere in that realm from the town of Varginha, outside the town of Varginha. Comes upon a debris field about the size of a couple football fields. He said it was like light metallic, very similar to what descriptions had from Jesse Marcel and the likes of Roswell.
I was going to talk about that later,
this
kind of memory metal.
Aluminum pieces. And he said that he said the first thing that it was extraordinary was the smell. When he got out of his car, he was overwhelmed with this smell of sulfur and ammonia. He said it was so strong, he grabbed his shirt and he held his shirt over his mouth and his eyes were watering. Just, my God, what is this? There was a section of the craft that was still intact, rather large. I said, did it appear to be big enough to have occupants? Absolutely. He said he didn't see any occupants, and just as he picks up a piece of this metal and he's holding it in his hands and he's just bewildered trying to figure out what on earth he's looking at. And he said he crumpled it up, and when he let it go, it was light as a feather. It retook its shape. And then a series of military trucks came in from the opposite direction on the dirt road, and he was forced at gunpoint to leave the area. Roughly 6 to 7 days later, he still didn't think that was an ET or otherworldly event. He just came upon a super stealth secret, a military project. Yeah. Never did he think alien. I mean, he was scratching his head like something's, And then about 7 days later in the town of Varginha, you get these really credible reports of a high level of military activity, roadblocks, and reports from civilians and military as well. Now, I say military because the police in Brazil are connected to the military. The firemen are connected to the military. So it's military, firemen. You're getting reports of a high level of activity in and around the town of Varginha, of reports of these strange creatures. Yeah. And the three most credible and the one that broadcast across the world, quite honestly, were these three women, ages 14, 16, and 21. There were two sisters, it was Liliani and Valkyria, and Katya, who was a 21-year-old friend of the two sisters. And they were just walking home, taking a shortcut in the town of Varginha through a little, like a field with a cinder block wall. It was like a place that was going to be developed, but it didn't quite get developed. It was like a parcel. And they're going through this field, and they said they saw some graffiti on the cinder block wall. And what caught their eye was the graffiti. And then they saw what looked like maybe a statue or something frozen, kind of crouching, kneeling. And they're looking as they got closer and closer, and they got about 8 to 10 feet away. And they realized this thing was nothing they'd ever seen before, was some sort of creature. And one of the girls yelled, and the creature in this slouched position, it was down with his hands up against the wall like this. And the creature looked at the girls right in the eyes. At which point, and if I'm going into too much detail, you just stop me. At which point, the two sisters, the 16-year-old sister, Valkyria, grabs her younger sister, Liliani grabs her younger sister, Valkyria, who was 14, by the hand, rips her out of there, and they're running, terrified of this thing. They get about, 40 yards away, and they realize Katya, the 21-year-old, is frozen in her tracks, locked eyes on this thing from, very close. I mean, it was broad daylight, 3:00 in the afternoon. So one of the girls leaves her younger sister and runs back to grab Katya, and grabs her by the hand and yanks her out of there. I said to Katya when I met with her at the exact location, during that moment of contact, when you locked eyes on this creature, was there any level of communication? Did you feel anything? Did it communicate anything? Did you feel threatened? Did you feel scared? And that's where I got the title of the film, during that moment of contact, was the when the girl locked eyes on this creature. And she said, yes, help me, I'm scared. So that story, because there were three witnesses, broad daylight, coupled with all the other military activity that you can literally go to the downtown square in Varginha, as we did. And I've done it multiple times. Yeah. People, they've seen the military trucks. They saw UFO activity. They saw their cousin knew the girl that saw the creature. It just goes on. Have connections to the fire department that were involved in the capture, or they knew the military police officer, Marco Cherese, who knew, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's got a piece of the puzzle. It's quite remarkable. Even the mayor, the current mayor, Verge, believes this incident happened. And ultimately, the beings were captured. The debris was taken to a place called Campinas. It's the kind of university and intellectual think tank or epicenter of all of Brazil. The universities and all the minds of Brazil are in this place, Unicamp, up in Campinas, and apparently that's where the bodies and debris were. And then then we got news from the Brazilian military that the Americans came in and kind of took over operations and flew at least the bodies and possibly some of the recovered debris back to the United States.
Yeah.
That's it, kind of in a nutshell. Yeah. But there's other.
Yeah, there's obviously loads. Yeah, yeah, and there's loads of other witnesses and
And
stuff, and obviously
it,
people will have to watch your documentary to get the full
look,
story.
I will be the first. I will be the first one to tell you. I know how outlandish, how unlikely, how unbelievable the whole story is, because I myself,
Yeah,
who's been making documentaries on the topic since the early 90s, 93, 94 is when I started making my first film. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it to the point where I refused to even look into it, because I thought there's
yeah.
no way an event of this magnitude could happen and the whole world not know about it, that this story wouldn't spread like wildfire. But I tell you, uh, that happened.
Yeah. I remember when I
It
first like
happened.
heard about it, and I kind of was like you in the
Yeah.
sense I'm not really going to look into it because, like, you hear lots of stuff. Oh, this might happen. This that doesn't sound very plausible. I'm not,
Oh
but
yeah, I
upon
know.
actually looking into it, yeah, it's very, very compelling. How did you first hear about it? Just tell me quickly. How did you first hear about it? And when?
I was doing a documentary called Out of the Blue, and
Yeah,
at the time, the I didn't have a title for the documentary. When I start films, I never have titles for them. They always come to me towards the end of production. Something will happen, and I'm sort of, what I do is I've never put together like a written proposal on any movies I've ever done. I just do broad strokes. I think of like, all right, let's map out this basic objective with with this film.
yeah.
So I was going over it with a partner of mine, this producing partner by the name of Tim Coleman, who used to write for the BBC. Very smart British guy. Very, I liked him. I like him a lot. And he said, and I was like, hey, we should focus on this case that happened in England, and possibly we should look over here, and we should do this FAA case that happened in '86, and da da da. And he goes, yeah, mate. There's this crazy case in Brazil where this UFO crashed and these aliens are walking through the town. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, I picked the wrong partner. I was like, shit, this guy's lost his bloody mind. And not only did I think I just literally just, it was as if he didn't even say it. I just completely discarded it. I discarded him. And fast forward years later, and this was in the 90s. So it had happened in 96. He was telling me about this in 99. That's just 3 years. And I just wrote it off. I promise you, I didn't think about it for one more second after he mentioned it. And then fast forward all these years later, he calls me up. He's living in Egypt. He's like, mate, you ended up doing a bloody documentary on this. And he goes, and I told you about this case back in 1999. I said, and you didn't believe me. I said, nope, I didn't believe you. And so I gave him a special thanks credit in the titles at the end.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I was going to Brazil back in 2011. It was 2011. And a very good friend of mine, who I respected a lot in the entertainment industry, is very more mainstream, but he has a quiet interest in the topic of UFOs. He calls me up and he's like, "Oh, you're going to Brazil? You got to look into that, that Varginha case where and I went, "Oh God, not this bloody case again." And I said, "Yeah, sure, Jeff, I'll look into it for you." Click, no intention of looking into it. And then I went to this place called Peruíbe, which is a couple of hours south of Sao Paulo on the coast. In fact, I remember it was at a conference that this gentleman put on. I'll think of his AJ Javard,
Yeah.
and I was actually there with Stanton Friedman, and Stanton was invited to the same conference, and Stanton started talking a little bit about the case, and he happened to be, I think, in Brazil. I believe it was the '90s when it
Really?
happened, right around that time, and he talked to a lot of the witnesses, and I respect Stanton a lot. And then I met some other witnesses at the conference, and I thought, well, hold on a second, maybe I'm going to have to reconsider. You got Dr. John Mack, Harvard psychiatrist, you got nuclear physicist and UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, who just coincidentally happened to be in the area when it happened, and all saying that something truly extraordinary took place. Maybe I shouldn't just dismiss this, and maybe I should reconsider looking into it. And so I did, and I spent roughly 12 years on and off with the help of my co-producer, Marco Leal, who's been boots on the ground for over 16, 17 years. And now, of course, I'm putting my reputation on the line to say this, but I believe that a UFO crashed and that beings were recovered, one of which was still alive. And they went back to the United States.
Yeah.
And what happened after that? The trail goes cold. Yeah. However, with these people will remain nameless. I have subsequently in recent months, I had people attend a couple of screenings. I did a premiere in New York. I did one in Los Angeles, and I had people come up to me in the reporters, high up reporters, and excuse me, they paid attention what I did with the phenomenon, because the phenomenon was a very mainstream documentary. This one kind of pushes the envelope a little bit, but I had them quietly come up to me and say, I just want you to know, I thought you might like to hear this. We've done discrete inquiries to some of our contacts within the Pentagon, and they all confirmed that this thing happened.
Yeah.
But just so you know, I thought you'd like to know that, but we're not reporting on it, and that's as far as it goes. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, thank you for that. I appreciate hearing that. I've spent 12 years on it. Had I not thought it happened, but it's nice to hear that, you know. So we'll have to see what happens with this new legislation that ultimately allows witnesses to come forward, violate the national security oath, and not fear prosecution or prison.
Yeah, that's
wild,
happening, and the whole thing
that's happening
wild.
on the Hill. That's happening on the Hill right now. So we're living in exciting times.
Yeah, indeed. Fingers crossed. Let me ask you a question that has come to me from. I interviewed recently Ronnie Vernet. He's a Brazilian UFO researcher. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he had an interesting take on the events in Virginia, and I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on his thoughts.
Okay.
I kind of already know what you're going to think about it, but let's see anyway. So he has this take that he kind of finds it a bit bizarre that there's very few witnesses to the UFO crash, but way more witnesses to the beings in the city, in the town. So he thinks, or his take, his, I guess, speculation is that there were these beings in the town. He thinks they were there, these creatures, whatever we want to call them, but that they might have come from the water. So I wanted to hear if you've heard somebody mention that before, if you've had any thoughts about that, or if
I told Marco Leal early on. I said, look, Marco, we don't have crash eyewitness testimony. We don't have a story here other than these beings. We've got to find this guy Carlos. We got to and because I was always like, I feel pretty solid about the beings, the creatures, the town, and the military presence and the capture and all that. But the connection to the UFO, I always felt was a little light. I went to the Maialini farm multiple times. I talked to the farm hand. I actually have this on video, and why it didn't end up in the film is just baffling to me. Who talks about all the neighbors around who heard the impact of something that crashed there. So that's one. Wow. Two, I met with Jose Carlos Pereira. He's a military, high-level military Brazilian Air Force brigadier, very high level. Okay, he refused to talk about the Varginha case on the record. However, off the record, we basically almost licked the dirt off his boots. We were begging and pleading with him, me and Marco Leal, and we just begged him to know, and he confirmed that event did occur. Three. There were archival testimonies from other truck drivers on the freeway that also saw the cylindrical shape. We couldn't track them down, but that we also saw the cylindrical shaped UFO crash at the Maialini Ranch. Four, we met with a military officer who was based at a military base, and he said everything that all the events that happened in the town of Varginha all started at the crash site in Maialini Farm. So and he did that on camera for us. So based on that, and if Carlos de Souza is lying, he deserves an Academy Award.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get on to next. That's a great answer, by the way. To talk about Carlos de Souza, what a compelling kind of part of the documentary that was, like intense, emotional, like it was really amazing to watch.
He did not come to us. Marco and his fellow Brazilian UFO researchers tracked him down after being in hiding for 26 years and ultimately convinced him to meet with us and go back to the site and tell the story. He did not track us down. He did not ask for a dime. We went after him and begged and pleaded with him. I think it took Marco about a year to get him to ultimately say, I'll do it.
Wow. Yeah, I was fighting back the tears watching that. Like when you found
Yeah.
the spot. Like so tell me a few things about that. So tell me how long it took you to find, or how long it took him, let's say, to find the spot of the crash. Because obviously when he kind of gets it finally, he's like frustrated. It's, you know, he's like, I can't really find it. It's, you could tell he's feeling a bit off. He's like, and then
we were just a few days into our month-long trip in Brazil that time. And I was thinking to myself, boy, this is off to a horrible start. How could this guy not actually find the damn impact site? How could you not remember where it is? This place isn't that big. And I was just feeling totally discouraged. I'm out in the field and I'm thinking, we've got to find this. Did this guy know? And the one indicator that I kept saying is, like I said, he said the debris field, and in the debris field, you could see a small white house, Casablanca. And he kept saying that. You could see that. I said, how certain are you that you could see this white house? And he said, 1,000% certain. I could see it in the debris, no question. He kept saying, oh, well, there was no white house. We looked everywhere to see in the debris field. So I got the drone. And I flew the drone up, and then in this one particular area, tucked behind some trees that had grown up clearly in the last 26 years, was a little white house. And then there was a field, and it was all exactly as he described. And I said, okay, we might have found it. And then and then you'll see Carlos, it's all captures on camera. It happened as it unraveled. It unraveled on camera. Nothing in that movie was staged. Everything happened as it happened. In fact, I remember the cameraman, DP David West, he's saying to me, slow down. I can't, you're going too fast. I said, Dave, you're going to have to capture what's going on right now. I can't wait for you to get your shit together and follow with the camera. He goes, okay, but if you want the shots, I was like, well, you got to speed up. And so he's running, and you see Carlos. It's almost like his eyes glaze over and he could see a film strip of the incident. He is just reliving that moment definitely. 26 years ago. It was so emotional. When I showed Carlos the clip of the military man at Eza saying that it all started at Myolini Farm, Carlos just floods of tears coming down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he disappeared because he's like, I never made a dime from this story. I just been ridiculed and laughed at and questioned, and my own family, I just stopped talking about it,
Yeah. I just felt all that at the crash site. Like that, there was like, it was all coming out. It was like, I knew it was real. I knew it was here. Like everything, like it just felt so raw.
Yeah.
It was so powerful, that scene. What was the word he was, how was it? Like now here, what was it? He says here in Brazil. I can't remember. Aki, like hundreds of times. Aki, and like the,
Aqui, Kio. Aqui, Kio.
Yeah,
it
that was powerful.
Crazy.
What did it feel like there? Like, was there like, did it feel any different to a normal field? Was there any kind of energy? I'm just thinking of a John Mack story I heard where he went to a crop circle in the UK and lay down, and allegedly he said he felt this like energy there, and it felt like energy.
So I didn't feel anything different. However, I flew my drone, and most people don't notice this. I did. I flew my drone over the area, and if you look at that alleged impact site from the air, the ground looks extremely different.
Really?
It looks molested. It looks like it, because he talked about this acid. When you watch Moment of Contact, take a look at that segment and look at it very carefully. That ground looks extremely different than the ground around. It looks like it was dug up, acid, whatever on there. Things aren't growing like they did everywhere else. Trust me, just look at the aerial footage of that site. It looks so much different than everything else, even 26 years later.
Yeah.
It
was just unreal, though. That scene was great. So it was epic. To ask you about another one that we've mentioned a couple of times. Oh, no, we haven't. I'll ask you that one in a minute. First of all, when you went to Eric Lopes or Lopes, I never know how to pronounce that name.
I know. Eric Lopes.
You had so much adrenaline. I could feel it through the screen, like how much adrenaline's going through you. I'm watching it. I'm thinking, James is really pushing to ask like this guy, a couple of questions. I'm like, James is going to get himself and everybody shot here because you obviously didn't hear what they're saying. And he's like, go away, I'm going to shoot you, no questions. And you're like, just one, let me just ask one, please. Yeah. And
well, you have to remember, for me, I've been looking into this case for over a decade. I've been hearing about, look, Carlos Souza, so I can never, even though I know him well and I love the man, Carlos Souza. I was like, we don't have a story without Carlos. We got to find this guy. So I've been wanting. So I was just like, we got to find the alleged crash eyewitness. You got to the driver to reportedly the second.
That's
capture,
the one.
Okay, we have you have 2 military police about 5:30, about 2.5 hours to maybe 3 later, after the girls reported coming within 8 to 10 feet of this alive being, whatever you want to call it, in and around the area. And we get perspective on this because we fly the drone. We've got, clearly documented eyewitness testimony of the military blockade. Then we've got and I've got one more thing I want to tell you about the crash site, about how the UFO link is. It's quite startling. And this is something that most people don't pick up on in the movie. And I should have made my point a little better. When we got the interview with the doctors, the family, that they only allowed us to interview, they were only going to tell us their story just to tell us their story for the first time in 26 years. They were friends with the doctor that we were renting the house with, that we were all staying outside Varginha. And when we got to their house, the 3 of them, it was the whole family, the husband, the wife, and the daughter.
And these were the ones that told that they'd seen something hovering around after the incident, later that evening.
They watched it for 15 or 20 minutes, and they kept saying he was looking for something. And it was at night. It was late at night on the January 20th. Okay, like around 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. I said, "What do you mean it was looking for something? What do you mean?" They said it was bloody well looking. It was doing this grid search, really low and slow and quiet looking. Well, it was flying, according to them, directly over the impact of the encounter, directly over one of the capture. If you're going to believe any of those eyewitnesses, that was a rescue mission operation. If you're going to believe those eyewitnesses that saw this thing, and we talked to other people in the town that saw these disc-shaped craft flying low and slow in a grid search over those areas where those creatures were reported, there's a connection with the UFO. Okay, that's the connection. And if you're to believe any of those accounts, and I know it's a tall tale, but if you're going to believe any of those accounts, they were trying to rescue their mates. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's extraordinary, and we realized that in the field. So anyway, about 2.5 to 3 hours after the girls come, face to face with this strange live being, there are 2 military officers on patrol, on the lookout for something extremely unusual. The military didn't tell them, "Hey, a UFO crash and these live aliens are running around town." They just be on the lookout for something extremely unusual. Eric Lopes is the driver. Marco Cherese is passenger. They're both military police, and they're 3 blocks away from where the girls saw this thing. It's about 2 to 3 hours later, and this creature apparently runs across the road, the car in front of them. Eric slams his brakes on. Marco jumps out the passenger seat without a moment's hesitation, without any fear whatsoever, and grabs this creature with his bare hands, puts it in the car, and they take it off to the hospital alive.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's insane. Okay, so a couple weeks later, Marco apparently, according to his family, he had like this greasy, smelly stuff all in his body, and he was rubbing alcohol. Apparently, he was trying to rub and clean himself off, and he had a little cut from when he, just a little nick. I think it was like right here under his arm. And he got infected, and it got worse and worse and worse. He took himself to the hospital. The doctor, Cesario, who worked on him, who we interviewed, did everything he could to save this guy's life. He was 23 years old, perfectly healthy. He got this infection, and it killed him. And the doctor said he'd never seen anything like it prior, never seen anything like it after. Normal antibiotics that would normally knock this thing out didn't even phase it. It killed a perfectly healthy 23-year-old young military man. We talked to the family about the incident. We talked, as I said, we talked to the doctor, but we didn't talk to Eric Lopes, the driver. He was the only one left alive that was a witness to the event. It's like that. His testimony is the most important. Gold. I mean, my God, it's absolute pure gold. The family of the dead military police officer, the deceased military police officer, particularly his sister, Marta, was like, Eric won't talk even to us.
Yeah.
All Eric would have to do is come forward and say, hey, it didn't happen. It's all a myth. But Eric doesn't do that. And he wouldn't even do that to the own family. He just and I talked to some other Brazilian UFO researchers that told me that don't go near that guy. Like, he made it extremely clear back in 1996, you come near me and you're going to face some dire consequences. So we've been looking for Eric Lopes forever, but nobody could find the guy. Well, I get meet with the local town mayor. And he says, I love your efforts and what you guys are doing. If there's anything I can do to help, you just let me know. And I thought to myself, yes, in fact, there is something you could do to help. Help us find Eric Lopes. So the mayor says, okay. So he gets on it. He gets in touch with the former chief of police or some high level chief military police guy, and this guy's son. A couple days later, he connects us. He says, we know where Eric Lopes is. We found him. We'll take you out to his house.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you the truncated version, but we'll take you out to his house, and the rest is on you. Well, as we're about to go, and it was maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, something like this, and you're going to have a little escort. We have a couple of production vehicles and then a smaller car, two vans, a smaller car, and then the Mercedes, the guys that are going to take us out to his house. And right as we were leaving, I grabbed one of the translators and I stopped the Mercedes in front of me. I nipped out of the car, parked in the middle of the street, and I got to the Mercedes and with the translator, and I said, hey, would you mind actually not just taking us to his house and, there it is. Would you mind driving up with us and coming to the front door, perhaps? Would you mind? Sure. Yeah, I could do that.
That was a good shout.
I think that saved my life, mate. Yeah. I'm not kidding you. Yeah. I think that saved my life, because I think if I had just walked up there, he would have just opened fire. And probably
he would have at least been shooting around you to scare the shit
probably,
out of you.
Because he was threatening to kill everybody there when we came upon him. Now, this is one thing that doesn't come across in the film, because the cameraman, David West, had never filmed under conditions like this. The guy was sitting in the window looking down at us.
Yeah.
He was on the second level. We were on the ground level. I heard voices. I was so confused. I heard voices and some interaction. I'm looking around and then I look up and I see him in the window looking out at us, and there was no screen or anything. He was just right there. He had one hand kind of in the air and he was doing this, and the other hand was down below the windowsill, kind of tucked down like this. It's all speculation as to what he might have had in his hand. But he was doing this to the cameraman the whole time, a lot of the time, looking at the cameraman. Well, I'm looking at this guy. I don't know what's being said, okay? Because it's all Portuguese. It's speaking really quickly, and it's slightly at a distance. But I'm looking at this guy, and I'm looking in his eyes. I've never seen eyes like I did on this man, Eric Lopes. You could just tell that this was a man who's been burdened with a story that he's had to probably take to his grave for whatever reason, whatever the military told this guy.
Yeah.
That he has been living with this deep, dark secret. You could see it in his eyes. I've never, ever looked into anyone's eyes like this man. I mean, I was spooked by it. I didn't know at the time for sure that this was even Eric Lopes. I suspected it might have been, but I didn't really know what the guy looked like. But I
Yeah.
looked into this man's eyes and wow. Okay. Wow. All Eric Lopes would have had to do, terribly sorry, gentlemen. There's nothing to see here. I was not the driver. I was not involved in this. This is all make believe. This is all just one big conspiracy. I had nothing to do with it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming by. He doesn't do that. He says, before we even ask a single question, excuse me, if you're here to talk about the ET, Eric Lopes won't talk. He refers to himself in the third person. Eric, if you're here to talk about the ET, Eric Lopes, it's like the police officer coming up to your house at a party. You open the door, the cop just says hello or good evening, and you say, hey, there are no drugs in this house, officer. It's like, do you know what I mean? Like, we didn't ask him about the ET. We didn't ask him about the incident. We didn't ask him, were you driving? None of that. That's the first thing that he says. And then get out of here or I'm going to start shooting everybody. Okay.
Yeah. Like you said, if you're here to talk about the ET, it didn't happen. Now,
that was the first thing he said. That's like an admission right there. It was like, huh? Yeah. And, man, that was the craziest, 5 minutes of my entire career. No question.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It came through the camera as I love the way it was filmed as well. You felt like kind of like you're there, only without the risk of being shot, which was obviously a bonus.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was wild, and I appreciate you putting yourself on the line to try and get something out of him, because holy, would we love to hear what he has to say? Like, oh wow, that would be unbelievable. Like you say, it would be just some of the most important testimony ever. Another, I guess, top 5 minutes or top interview or top moment of your career would probably be the interview with the guy you dubbed Military X. So tell me, again, we're kind of starting to run out of time and I don't want you to miss your flight. So tell me in maybe like about 5 minutes or less, like just about that and what that was like.
So there were a couple of military men back in 1996 with the help of Brazilian researcher, Uberajara Rodriguez wasn't directly involved with that. It was Peccaccini, Victor Peccaccini. And I'll give you the truncated version. Couple of witnesses, direct first-hand witnesses from the military base were directly involved with the transportation of one of the creatures. Okay, in a sort of way of protecting them, they gave an on-camera statement with the intention that it would never be released unless anything happened to them. It was a insurance policy on these witnesses because everyone's life, including Souza, was threatened. Everybody. And sometimes they wouldn't even have to say, hey, we're going to come and shoot your whole family up. Just the visit alone, and the witnesses were terrified 26 years later. So we knew about this guy. Marco found him. I mean, praise to Marco Leal, my co-producer, Brazilian counterpart, and his connections. He spent years tracking this guy down. And he said, he'd never come forward, ever. All the money in the world won't make it happen. Somehow we had this narrow window with him. I got to meet with him. And I remember distinctly thinking, I'm probably sitting with a gentleman who, we had all of his military records, all the photographs of him in the military. There was no question this guy was legit. I'm probably sitting next to a guy, looking him in the eyes, who drove a flippin' alien around. Like, just imagine for a moment if that's true. Yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy shit, this guy drove an alien around. And I remember, if true, I said this to him, if your story is true, you have a level of confirmation on the biggest story in the history of mankind that very few people on this planet have.
Yeah.
What does that feel like? And I was expecting like this really profound kind of answer of like, hey, God, it's great to have that level of confirmation. It's wonderful to know, this has ruined his life.
Yeah.
The threats, the secrecy, he wished it never had happened to him. And he felt a sense of relief, albeit even though we had to disguise his voice and film him from the backside, that was it. There was no other opportunity. It was either that or nothing. The fact that we got that was unbelievable. Sure. That was a moment in my career that I will never, ever, ever forget. And look, I'll remind your audience, I know as outlandish as this whole story comes across, believe me, I know it does. If true, this is probably the best case in the history of every case on the planet. And it happened in 1996. So I'm hoping that this film will trigger more research, encourage more witnesses to come forward as the film gets more out into the mainstream. Because it's a tough pill to swallow that this is just the beginning of this case. There's a lot more for all of us to learn. There's photographic evidence, videotaped evidence. We got about that close. We're still about that close. And it's
I want to ask you about that in a second. He said that to you as well, didn't he? Military X, he said, don't stop looking into it. Don't stop researching. Keep going.
Look, mate. There has been screenings of Moment of Contact in the town of Varginha with the mayor and the town council and all the bureau of, and there were people coming up to my counterpart, Marco Leal. Hey, here's my card. We need to talk, kind of thing. We just haven't had the time. Marco's dad died suddenly last year of a heart attack in the shower. His mother's been going through some hard times with illness. I've got an 8-year-old son. If I could be in Varginha right now, I would be. And I am going back. I will continue to go back. Marco's going back. This is an ongoing story. I can assure you that you don't just walk away from those types of leads and not follow up. Again, Moment of Contact is just the beginning of this journey.
Yeah. And like you said, it's going to become more mainstream. More people are going to learn about it. And that's going to allow more people to research it. And also it will give people an opportunity to try and say, come up with prosaic explanations for parts of it if you can. And which I haven't heard any reasonable ones yet. They come up with like the greasy homeless man who, things like that. But it doesn't, it's not worth even spending the time to talk about it. I think for the rest of our time together, about 10 minutes, let's try and like steamroll through. Let's try and do kind of quick fire. I'll try and ask you the things I was going to ask you, but we'll just have to make it real snappy. If that's right,
I'm so sorry to your audience because we had originally scheduled 2 hours, and then at the last possible minute, completely unexpected, I had to fly to Los Angeles from the East Coast. 6-hour flight, attend an event yesterday, and then flying. It was kind of an important big whatever, and I'm suddenly I got to go to the airport, catch my flight, and I'm barely going to make it as it stands. So, Los Angeles got the worst traffic in the history of mankind.
So let's do it. Let's motor through. So, Military X guy, was there anything he didn't, or he said that you didn't include in the documentary that would maybe be interesting? Same question for anybody else as well, I guess. If there's any like tidbits that you left out. So go on. What was that? You said yes.
Okay, so I got to be careful, but let's just say that listen to his testimony very carefully when he talks about the videotaped evidence and the level of confirmation he gives of certainty that he responds to about videotaped evidence, and you could read between the lines from that.
Yeah. So on that then. You share his certainty that there
is
question. Video footage.
No question.
Okay.
Zero
and
question.
Then obviously.
And I talked to multiple people that'd seen it.
Yeah.
Even one.
You haven't seen it.
No, I've not. No, oh God. I just can't. So let's put it this way. There were 3 or 4 very credible sources. Not one of these sources was tracking us down. We were going after them. It was a witness like, oh, I know that this person, we would follow that lead, end up at their doorstep. We were on our way to one of the persons who had a photograph of it. One of the creatures was alive and one of them was deceased, according to the person, 2 people that we talked to that saw the photograph.
Yeah.
We knew the guy that had it. We were on our way to his house. We were about an hour away, and he just completely freaked out, don't come near me. I'm concerned about my safety. That was, and we were not about a day away from Marco being taken out to show the footage from a guy. Yeah. And then the base called either the people that we had just met with or the people that we were about to meet with. They didn't threaten them. The base just called and just said, "Hey, how's it going? How's the family? Are you still living at this address? Oh, good. Yeah. Things are going good? Yeah, there's a documentary film crew poking around from America. They reach out to you. Did you meet with them?" That kind of shit.
Yeah.
Spooky shit. Okay. And so we were told at the time, disappear, don't contact us for at least 6 months and just let the dust settle and cool the fuck off. And so, excuse my French, but we did. And yeah, very, very frustrating. However, I ask your audience to think about it for a moment, because when it comes to the actual execution of how do you get a cash reward in from the States, you can't carry $100,000 in cash into you can't wire it. You can't do it via how do you do it?
Comment below.
And then you start, and then word gets out that American coming in with 100,000 in cash. You know how much 100,000 in cash is? It's a lot of money here. Over there, it's about, we're talking real. So you think about our safety, our security, like word gets out, and then all of a sudden, people want to rob you.
If I totally put you on the spot and say, what percentage chance do you think that
50,
this footage, any of this footage, 50-50, in the next how many years do you think?
Next year or two.
In the next year or two. What about in the next 10 years? Would you give it a higher percentage?
Say, probably, I would say 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because look,
we're in touch. Some people need to.
We're in touch with the people who have it. We offered an extremely high dollar amount. I'm talking 100,000 of cash. Okay. I don't need the money. I said, well, the town of Varginha, I'm sure the children could use education, housing, food, medical. That money could go a long way for the children of Varginha. And the person said, okay, you got me thinking here. I said, Matt, it could be a really nice thing you could do for the children of the town of Varginha. That got them thinking. So that was, about 7, 8, 9 months ago. And we keep following up. Then we have a number of, when it's time, it was like, well, when is it time? Now's the time. I can't force their hand. I'm not the one in control here. You know what I mean?
No, I get that. Yeah. Well, I'll ask you again in a couple of months when we talk next and see if anything's moved, see if anything's shifted.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just going to steamroll through these. So you kind of said it earlier. You did really. You said you believe at this point that there were aliens in Varginha on that day. But so when you say aliens, are you talking about interplanetary extraterrestrials, or are you kind of not putting it in a specific box like that? You're leaving it open.
I'm leaving it open. I was saying alien in the sense that it's not, non-human intelligence, right? Alien to us.
Yeah.
And that there were UFOs involved. UFOs apparently involved in the. We have lots of eyewitness testimony about these disc-shaped craft that were looking for something at night after, So you
and they were they were very compelling.
You have the farmers. You have people in the daytime talking about the crash site, and you start putting all these pieces together, and it paints a picture of some unidentified flying object crashed, and live beings were seen and captured.
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's you get.
That's a good answer.
That's the picture it paints.
Yeah. It's like what seems to have happened there seems. I have no reason to not trust all these people telling me this has happened and this has happened. As you said,
none of those witnesses came to us. We came to them. We tracked them down and pleaded with most of them to get them to come forward. I mean, look at the guy that took the X-rays, the Dr. X. It's incredible. I don't know why it was so compelling to. All he saw was a black body bag and a small with high level of security, right?
But he was convinced
He
there was
was,
something. Yeah.
oh yeah, with the smell and the size and everything else. Like that guy had been sitting on that story for 26 years. He was directly participating. He said, look, I didn't see it. It was right there, but it was in a tiny little bag and it stank all, just the x-rays, and they wouldn't let him see the x-rays. There's just so many pieces of this to make this incredible story. It's just
so compelling. Let me ask you these two real quick. From a patron called Jake, he's one of my two patrons, very helpful. He contributes to the show. So he wants to know: has the trail gone cold regarding following the craft and the beings to the US, or do you have some leads? I guess again, just a super quick answer for that one.
So it's gone cold in some respects for me. However, there have been some inquiries behind the scenes regarding the likelihood of this event having occurred in the United States.
Yeah.
And involvement, and it's been confirmed at fairly high levels that this did happen. Now, some legislation was just passed, because I remember, I guess I could say this, I remember Lou Elizondo, who ran the ATIP program at the Pentagon, said to me, mate, all he said to me is, mate, I don't think you realize just how the timing on your film and everything that's happening, the stars are lining. And basically what it is, it's legislation that allows witnesses to violate their security oaths. It's a process through the members of Congress that would protect them from being prosecuted or going to prison. And so I'm told right now, today, on the Hill, that witnesses are coming forward that were directly either involved or have stories of where this crash debris is. And that's happening, I'm told, right now. Now, that's a process, awesome. So I don't know how long it takes for this stuff to get released to the general public, but I can assure you that this that moment of contact has made ripples in the United States internally.
Awesome. That's excellent to hear. And like I said, hopefully we'll follow up about that again in a couple of months. Have you or any of the people that you interviewed for the documentary had any trouble with any authorities since the release?
Not in the States. But in Brazil, we left. It was pretty after the Eric Lopes incident, and then this other stuff that we've met with from people from the military base. It was time to go. It was felt we know we were being watched, observed, and it was I was pretty spooked. I was worried about getting the tapes back to the United States, so I put everything on a drive. I quadruple backed everything up, and I FedExed it from the town of Varginha back to the United States, or just outside Varginha.
Yeah.
Just in case my bags got frisked or they took my tapes or whatever. Yeah,
that would be awful. And do you want to mention any kind of unsung heroes of the documentary, of Moment of Contact? Anybody that hasn't really, gotten any public recognition, or anybody that's kind of unknown? Yeah, I mean, look at that helped in a big way.
The witnesses that came forward, AJ Javard, the late AJ who just passed a couple of months ago. You've got Claudio Covo, who was an engineer and Brazilian UFO researcher. He has since passed. Ubadajara Rodriguez, who's been silenced. He initially investigated the case. There's archival footage of him. There's Dr. Roger Lear, who also passed. I met with him in 2013. He gave me the tapes that he shot back in 2002, 2002, something like that. I think it was 2002. Of the research that he had done. Dr. John Mack, Harvard psychiatrist. We got some of the archive footage in there from his efforts. Dr. John Mack was funded by Lawrence Spelman Rockefeller. He was in Virginia weeks after that case happened, interviewing the girls. I mean, talk about having your finger on the pulse. I mean, he was in Rua, Zimbabwe in 1990.
I was just going to say that,
also being funded by Lawrence Rockefeller with a whole camera crew and interviewing all those children. So those are a lot of people that were involved that don't get the credit they deserve. Marco Leal, my co-producer, he's been working diligently since he was a teenager on this case.
That's awesome. This has been awesome, James. Just before I let you go, is there any kind of last words, any kind of words of wisdom, a message, anything at all that you want to say to people that have watched or listened?
Suspend judgment, listen to the eyewitness testimony, and then draw your own conclusion. And this is a group effort. This is not just, I encourage further investigation. I encourage FOIA requests, putting pressure on the U.S. government. We're all in this together. And if this story is true, which I'm putting my credibility on the line, that it is, it's the biggest case in the history of all UFO cases, period. And it's the definitive proof. And there's no gray zone with this case. Either it's the biggest hoax ever and a whole town was involved, or it's the biggest story in the history of mankind. There's no gray zone. You know what I mean? So
yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no middle ground there. It's all or nothing.
If the latter is true, then hey, this is the case that we've all been waiting for. So I encourage people to ask questions, to look into it further, probe the government, those types of things. Yeah, and I don't know. You're in the UK. If you can watch, do you have to watch it on Vimeo, or does it come on iTunes, or how do you?
I'm actually in France, but I did Vimeo.
Oh, Vimeo.
I got the extra footage stuff. The other kind of interviews and on the side. So that was a good way to do that.
Excellent. Yeah, because people are always asking me in Europe, and so Vimeo is good in Europe if you're going to watch.
Vimeo's good. I think Apple would have got the same thing. Amazon is where I bought the Phenomenon, and you don't get the extra footage.
Right.
About that a few years ago. Vimeo and Apple, and I'll put the link in the description. And obviously, if anybody hasn't seen the documentary, go and watch it. I can't wait to talk to you again, hopefully in a couple of months, James. And thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry to cut it short, but I will make up for it in a couple months.
I can't wait. And thank you again for all your hard work with these immense documentaries.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thanks to James Fox for talking with me, and thank you for listening to our conversation. If you haven't seen all of James's documentaries yet, please go and do so, and encourage all of your friends and family to do the same. Please comment below and let me know what you think took place in Varginha in 1996. Please see the description for relevant links, subscribe to continue unraveling the universe with us, and please consider contributing via Patreon to help us continue making content. Thank you.